a verse in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I specifically selected verse 54, so I'll recite the Sanskrit for you, translation. Srila Prabhupada. So, and I hope it's okay that this class is in, jeg tænkte den engelsk. Jeg håber det er under den her, det her foredrag er på engelsk, fordi vi har så mange engelsktalende, der ikke kan følge med ellers. Så. So this particular verse, the Sanskrit, it sounds as follows. Arjuna uvacha stita pradashaka pasa samadhi stasya keshava stitadi kim prabhaseta kimasita rajeta kim. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. So this is the translation. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak, and what is his language? How does he sit, and how does he walk? So in this particular book called the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking philosophy to his friend Arjuna. And in this particular exchange between Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his friend Arjuna, who is on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and who requests Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to enlighten him about what he should do, what should be his course of action, because in a perplexed state of mind, standing on a battlefield, having to fight his relatives, family members. So Arjuna is here asking Krishna, what's the symptoms of one who is spiritually situated? What's the symptom of a generally spiritually situated person? How does he act? How does he talk? What's the symptoms of his character that we can tell here is a spiritually situated person? So this is actually what Arjuna he wants to know. So therefore he puts the question like this. And we'll hear a little bit further what Srila Prabhupada, our spiritual master, seated here on the Vyasadeva, on the elevated seat, for those who may not know, he gives a commentary to the verse, and we'll continue to, we'll read this. As there are symptoms for each and every man in terms of his particular situation, similarly, one who is Krishna conscious has his particular nature, talking, walking, thinking, feeling, etc. As a rich man has his symptoms by which he is known as a rich man, as a diseased man has his symptoms by which he is known as diseased, or as a learned man has his symptoms, so a man in transcendental consciousness of Krishna has specific symptoms in various dealings. One can know his specific symptoms from the Bhagavad Gita. Most important is how the man in Krishna consciousness speaks, for speech is the most important quality of any man. It is said that the fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly, a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once. The immediate symptom of a Krishna-conscious man is that he speaks only of Krishna and of matters relating to him. Other symptoms then automatically follow, as stated below. So a particular point in this commentary I would like to try to elaborate on, and it is that Prabhupada, he says that speech is the most important quality of any man. So I wanted us to think about this statement, that speech is the most important quality of any man. So how do we understand this? So this we'll try. And Prabhupada says that a Krishna conscious person, he speaks only about Krishna. And otherwise, a fool will speak something else. So I thought to elaborate on this subject matter, spiritual sound vibration versus that which is not spiritual, which we may call material. What's the difference between the quality of speaking when it is when it's spiritual speaking, transcendental speaking, and when it is not transcendental speaking, when it is material, and what's actually the problem with material speaking, with material sound? What's the benefit of spiritual sound, and what's the disadvantage, the problem with material sound? So this is actually a quite deep topic, but I thought we'd try to get into that. And so I prepared some few notes on that. And I would like to refer to one particular verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a verse in the second canto, 9th chapter, verse 34. And the verse line goes, Rite artam yat patiyetam. And this is Lord Krishna also speaking. And he says in this verse, O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value, if it is without relation to me, has no reality. Know it as my illusory energy, that reflection which appears to be in darkness. So what Krishna here says, that any sound we vibrate, if it doesn't have any connection to him, then he says that sound, that vibration, that is known as my illusory energy, which is also one other word for the Lord's illusion, is the material energy. We speak of spiritual energy and we speak of material energy. So Krishna, he says that whatever is spoken that has no connection with Krishna, that is to be known as material energy. And it says it's a reflection that appears to be in darkness. So I will try to visualize this. Well, how do we see this? How do we perceive what is material energy and what is material sound? What's the effect of it? So I'll try to examine a little bit about this. And as we know, Srila Prabhupada, he came here to give spiritual enlightenment, education to us. He came to the West because there was a lacking. He could understand there was a lacking here in the West. And that lacking was spiritual knowledge, knowledge about the spirit soul and the spirit soul's eternal race to Krishna. That was what Srila Prabhupada came to enlighten the people of the West about. So what we have here in the West, if we go into Copenhagen city, if we look around, what you will see, most likely you'll see some big billboards someplace on the side of the street. They put these big billboards on the walls. And what do we see on these big billboards? There's some suggestions. If you go into Copenhagen and you see a billboard on the wall, What do you see most often? You see some, most likely some lightly dressed. It's quite often that we see some very lightly dressed female person, some lady with very little clothes on, isn't it? Isn't it a fact? Isn't it very common to see this? We may be smiling, but yes, that's actually what we happen to see. And another thing that we happen to see is this advertisement for some mobile phone. Like we have some advertisement for iPhone or whatnot. So is that? So one may ask. So what does that have a connection with spirituality? You know, how is that connected? How is that connected to Krishna? How is it by you seeing, by a person seeing that form, trying to sell something, trying to sell some clothes, trying to sell an iPhone? Well, how is that connected to the Supreme Creator who created this whole universe? Everything that we see, you know, all this manifestation that we see around us. This, how did this mobile phone make you think, or make it connect you with the Supreme Creator of everything that exists? So we find that it doesn't. There's no connection between the mobile phone or what we see on the billboards, or like what we buy in the shopping window. It doesn't have any connection, you see, with the Creator of all these things. So that's why we can know that the state of affairs of this material world, of this place we're living in, a lot of it simply doesn't have a connection. Simply doesn't have a connection with the Lord. So what happens when we dive into this? When we buy these things, we buy a mobile phone, or we try to find some relationship in this material world and try to enjoy that, try to get pleasure out of that. Then we most find that there's some sense of frustration, that we have some idea of satisfaction by buying the mobile phone, by buying into all these ideas that people want to sell us, concepts they want to sell us, like that which is not connected with the Lord. You know, it's a matter of me wanting to gratify myself, or want to have some, try to buy into what we see in this material world. So what we find, there is a frustration, because we expect this to last. So I wanted to try to get this concept of we want something to last forever. Has some of you heard this expression that diamonds are forever? Yeah? You heard this? Diamonds are forever. And did somebody ever tell you that they will love you forever? Like, I will love you forevermore. Did somebody tell you that? Yes? Yes. So that is the thing, that the soul is actually, we as persons, Krishna, he explains that we are eternal, that we are eternal souls, and we want something to last forever. So that's why we say these things, like diamonds, they are forever. And we say to someone, I love you forever, because actually we want to love someone forever. Like, it's actually something that's quite natural, because the soul, as Krishna explains, it is eternal. But when this eternal soul that we are situated within the body, it connects with the temporary matter, and that temporary matter, there's no connection with Krishna in that. Then we have the incompatible. We have an incompatible situation, and actually it is this incompatibility that is the source of all the frustration and all the, you can say, depression, and that we see in ourselves, that we see in others. It's because we're trying to make something compatible with something it is not compatible with. This eternal spirit soul is not happy with the temporary nature of this material world, the things of this material world we see around us and which we try to enjoy. And that is what is the problem. And material sound it means simply to speak about these temporary material things and thinking, having the concept that they will last, that this material situation, that it will last. So it's a concept that will be frustrated. So therefore, that is essentially, if we can understand it by that, that's the difference between spiritual sound vibration and material sound vibration. Material sound vibration is about the temporary matter, thinking it to be something which it is not, thinking it to be lasting when it is temporary. And spiritual sound vibration is about that which is actually lasting, talking about that which is eternal. So that means the eternal, the spirit soul, is talking about something which is eternal. And that's why we have the compatibility. There's a compatibility between the soul and Krishna, between soul and the Supreme Person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a compatibility, because the soul is eternal and Krishna is eternal. Therefore there is no frustration. So I'd like to elaborate a little bit further one incident in the scriptures where one person was feeling dejection because of this, because of having spent too much energy and time in material sound vibration. He was not feeling satisfied, and then he got the idea how to change from only speaking materially to that very purposefully spiritual sound vibration. And this is also from the Bhagavatam, and this is in the first canto. And some of you may know that the Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled by a sage by the name Vyasadeva. And as explained, that sage Vyasadeva, he had arranged that all the bulk of Vedic knowledge meaning some texts or writings called the Upanishads, the Puranas, the Mahabharata. He had arranged that all of this was compiled together and written down. So after having done this, after having compiled the Upanishad, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, he was not feeling happy. He was not satisfied. And it is explained at that time, his spiritual master, because even Vyasadeva, who was compiling the Vedic literature, he also had a spiritual master. And that spiritual master was Narada Muni. So Narada Muni, he came to Vyasadeva, and actually he chastised him. He said this particular verse, Bhavatanuditam prayam yasho bhagavato malam yene vasho natusheta manyeta darshanam kilam. And that means you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that philosophy, which does not satisfy his transcendental senses, is considered worthless. So Narada Muni says to Vyasadeva that you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So you have not spoken about Krishna. As we had in the verse, they say that the symptoms of a Krishna conscious person is that he only speaks about Krishna. So Narada Muni said to Vyasadeva, actually, you have not spoken sufficiently. You have not spoken sufficiently about Krishna. And that is why you're feeling this dejection in your heart. So then, after having pointed out the fault in his disciple, because the Vedic literature, some of you may have studied the Vedic literature, and you know in the Vedic literature there's so many topics. There's a Vedic literature that deals with how to execute warfare. There's a Dhanurveda. There's Ayurveda, which most of you may have heard of. That's a Ayu means life, so Veda knowledge, the knowledge about life, the body, how it works, how to maintain the health of the body, like that, and so on. There are many topics of the Vedic literature with the Vedas they deal with. So all of this was compiled by Vyasadeva, but still all of this knowledge, which is also very useful, but this knowledge, it can be used, it can be applied, but if there's no Krishna in it, if Krishna is not very explicitly there, then it may just be material energy, because all this nice knowledge, if it remains unconnected, if it is not connected with Krishna, then it falls into the category what Krishna says, then know it as my illusory energy. If it is not connected, it has no reality. So it takes on that temporary aspect and becomes incompatible with the eternal soul. So Narada Muni, he pointed out this fault in Vyasadeva, and then having pointed out the fault, then he gave the instruction. What should he do? What should Vyasadeva do in order to become happy? What was lacking? How he could correct his dejection? How he could come out of his depression? And so then he speaks, which is 1:540. He speaks. Tvama pyadabra sruta visrutam vibo samapyate yena vidam bubupsitam prakayadukar muhuradvitatmanam sanklesha nirvanam usanti nanyata. So this is Narada Muni's instruction. He says, please therefore describe the activities of the Almighty Lord, which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas. For that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the common masses of people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way out of such miseries. So, Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva to speak about the activities of the Lord, to speak about Krishna and what his activities are. And he says that will have two effects. The first effect is that those who are already enlightened, those who know that the soul is eternal, that we as persons, that we are eternal beings, and that we are meant for spiritual life, to serve the Lord in devotional service, then he said that if you speak about Lord Krishna's activities, then those persons, they will be able to satisfy the hankerings within their heart. Because every living entity has some hankering. It's only a matter of whether we hanker for this temporary material world, or if we have spiritual enlightenment, if we spiritually have spiritual enlightenment, then we hanker after our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our relationship with Krishna. So every person has some hankering in his heart. So if one is enlightened about the soul, about one's identity as eternal spirit soul, that hankering is still there. And that hankering is satisfied by hearing about Krishna. The spiritually enlightened person, he gets his heart gets enlivened, and he finds satisfaction by hearing and chanting about Krishna. So that's the first effect. That if Vyasadeva, he corrects his instead of stopping dealing with all the material, you can say, aspects of Vedic literature and speaking more directly about Krishna, then you will be able to satisfy the hankerings within the hearts of great learned persons. And there's the second effect, you may say, that Narada Muni he mentions. He says that it will also mitigate the miseries of the common masses of people who are always suffering from material pangs. And this we can verify in today's society. Is there some dissatisfaction? Is there some misery? Do we see misery around us? Well, for one thing, it's quite obvious that there are many people, and many times also including ourselves, that we experience some misery here. Because we're in the temporary world, we know that we have to die, that we have to leave this body, and in our dealings with this material world, we come across so much disappointment. So we are in a miserable, we may find ourselves in a miserable condition of life, and in that miserable condition of life, then Narada Muni says, the solution to come out of that misery is also to hear about the Lord, to hear about Krishna, hear about how Krishna, he presents himself in the Bhagavad Gita, how great learned persons, they speak about Krishna in the Bhagavatam. If we simply hear that, if we allow that topics of the Lord, of Lord Krishna to enter into our ear, then the effect of that is that Narada Muni says that our miseries, they will stop. We will find the solution to our miseries. And Narada Muni says there's no other way out of these miseries. We will not be able to stop our dissatisfaction by buying something more, by finding by finding something else to buy which we don't have, or trying to replace someone in our life which doesn't serve us nicely anymore. That's not the way that we solve our problems. So we don't solve our problems, our material problems, with a material solution. The solution has to be spiritual. So Narada Muni says that a spiritual solution to a material problem, that is to hear about Krishna, to allow that vibration about Krishna, the topics relating to Krishna, to enter into one's ear. And if that vibration doesn't enter into the ear, then the material problem remains unsolved. The incompatibility between the eternal soul and the temporary material atmosphere, that problem, it remains and it's not solved. So the solution to the miseries of the common masses of people, and we may count ourselves as the common people, if we feel dejection in our lives, if we feel illusioned and so forth, we may see that we need to have that problem solved. And by hearing about Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, if we read the Bhagavad Gita, hear from devotees, study it ourselves, then that may be, that misery may disappear from our lives. Disappear from our minds and disappear from our hearts. So that is why it is so much stressed. And that's actually what Prabhupada, he came to give us. Srila Prabhupada came to give us topics about the Lord. He came to speak about Lord Krishna to us who didn't have this idea, didn't have any literature. Before Prabhupada came, the Bhagavad Gita as it is wasn't even existing. Purely as it is actually meant, as it is described in Krishna, it wasn't existing. And the Srimad Bhagavatam, it wasn't existing until Srila Prabhupada, he came and gave it to us, available in English, so that we, from a Western background, could hear these topics. So we are just stressing what Srila Prabhupada stressed, that we should take advantage of this. Because if we want to have a solution to all the despair, all the difficulty we may experience in our lives, then this is the real solution. You have to have the time to lend your ear, to lend yourself to the description of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavatam. So, with that, I'd like to round off with one other information which makes it very easy for us, which we can all take benefit from, and that is there is